And now, ladies and gentlemen, from 1500 years before Christ, the man God chose to lead his people from the bondage of Egypt, who God gave the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai, here we have Moses.
Good morning, good morning. Such a pleasure for me to be here this morning and worship with God's children. Always a pleasure to worship with Christian people, especially modern day Christians. You know, as I've traveled all over the world and spoken to different groups about my life in the New Testament or the Old Testament, I found one thing that stands out in my mind, and that is people haven't changed. Since 1500 years before Christ, people really haven't changed. Now, I know that you have your automobiles and you have your airplanes that fly from city to city and country to country. But you know, basically, people haven't changed, have they? While we had the same ideas, we had the same goals, we were success-oriented, and we were intrigued with things just as people today. So really, people haven't changed. Now, I don't know much about my childhood days. They tell me that when I was just a little tiny infant, that my mother put me in a floating basket and hid me in the bulrushes for my own protection. And then Pharaoh's daughter came and adopted me as her son. Folks, I grew up with all of the wealth of Egypt. I had everything at my fingertips. I had the finest of clothes. I had everything that Egypt had to offer. The best education. Because I was a prince. Growing up as Pharaoh's son, I would have been in line for the kingship of Egypt. There was one thing that really bothered me, though. My people, you see, I'm Jewish. I'm Israel. And my people were in bondage in Egypt. They were slaves to the Egyptians. And I hated that so much. That hurt me so much to see my people in slavery, in bondage. I just couldn't stand it. In fact, I hated it so much that one day I killed one of the Egyptians. And you know, I just felt so badly inside. It hurt so much to know that I had done something wrong in the sight of God. It just hurt me so much. And I had to run away. I ran away from home. I had spent 40 years in Pharaoh's court. But now I'm running away from home and I'm going to the wilderness, where there I was a shepherd, a lowly shepherd. After having enjoyed all of the finest things that Egypt had to offer, you see, things don't really satisfy. Only God can satisfy. And did you know that God will get your attention sometimes? I was returning home one evening, and I noticed there was a bush. A bush was burning, and it was all in flame. And I looked, and it didn't burn up. It wasn't consumed. And as I drew near to the bush, God spoke to me. He said, Moses, I want you to be a leader among your people. Moses, I want you to lead your people out of the slavery in Egypt. I said, God, surely, God, you don't mean me, God. You see, I stuttered. I said, God, I'm not worthy. I've sinned, God. He said, trust me, Moses. Trust me, my child. I'll teach you how to be a leader. I said, but God, you see, I can't speak. He said, trust me, my child. And did you know he gave me my brother, Aaron, to make my speeches for me? You know, God makes a way for us. If we'll walk in the center of His will, God's going to get your attention, folks. I'll never forget the look on Pharaoh's face when God started getting his attention. You know, there were plagues. Pharaoh had a terrible, hardened heart. Pharaoh was a wicked person. And he didn't want to let the Israelites go. He said, no, I'm not going to let them go. So God sent him some flies. There were flies everywhere. Flies in the bread, flies in the bed, flies in the milk. You couldn't even drink a drink of water without having it full of flies. And the flies were crawling around the corners of the eyes. There were flies everywhere. Finally, Pharaoh said, all right, take the people. But then he turned right around and changed his mind. He said, no, they can't go. And then he had to put up with lice. All kinds of locusts. The rivers were turned to blood. They had nothing to drink. The water stunk so bad you couldn't even get near it. All the water was blood. Pharaoh still had a hardened heart. A heart so full of sin, he said, no, they can't go. I'll never let the people go. Why, it would be an economic disaster for my country if we didn't have slavery. But you know, God will get your attention, folks. Believe me, God will get your attention. And the killing of the firstborn got Pharaoh's attention. The weeping, the wailing, the crying. You've never heard such screaming in all of your life. What was happening? God was getting Pharaoh's attention. Well, you probably remember the story how Pharaoh said, yes, go Moses, go, take those people and go. Get them out of here. We can't stand any more of these terrible plagues. And we went. We left Egypt. We packed all of our belongings and we left Egypt. And we came to the Red Sea. And the people came and said, Moses, we're at the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army's coming back after us now. What are we going to do? And I said, God, me. We got into the wilderness. The people came and they said, Moses, we're hungry. We don't have anything to eat. I said, God, the people are hungry. They have nothing to eat. He says, trust me, Moses. And he rained food from heaven. People then came and said, Moses, we're thirsty. We have nothing to drink. I said, God, the people are thirsty. They have nothing to drink. What are we going to do, God? He said, trust me, my child. Trust me. And he gave us water gushing from the rocks. And you know, when everything seems to go along okay, everything's just moving along so smoothly, you know what happens? It happened to me. I began to not trust God. I trusted in Moses. I began to believe it was my power that was causing all of these things to come about. I'd strike the water in my name, strike the rocks in my name to try to get water. But I only got blood. And folks, when you begin to trust yourself, you begin to fail God. And I so miserably failed God. Oh, God, forgive me. God, forgive me. Forgive me, God, for not trusting you. Trying to take life in my own hands, folks. I was a miserable failure. That cost me the promised land. That cost me Canaan. That cost me all that God had promised. But you know, when I was in the center of God's will, and of course I asked for forgiveness. God always forgives. When I asked for forgiveness, and I went to Mount Sinai, and God gave me those hieroglyphics, those tables of stone that you know as the Ten Commandments, I felt so good. I felt so good inside. I felt so clean. I felt so happy. Everything was all right. God had forgiven me. I was in God's will. And folks, today, if you want joy, if you want peace, if you want soul rest, if you want complete happiness, don't wait for the plagues in your life. What is it, sir, that will take for God to get your attention? Lady, what will it take for God to get your attention? Will it take the death of one of your loved ones? Your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, or your son or your daughter? What does it take to get God to get your attention? Perfect peace can be found only one way, and that is trusting, obeying, and living in the center of God's will. Listen to the voice of God when He says to you, trust me, my child.